I am speaking up for humanity. I'm speaking up for communities that cannot speak up for themselves, because there are so many people in rural communities that are sleeping hungry, that are feeding on just a meal a day or nothing at all. And this is because food security has been threatened. And these people cannot speak up. These people cannot talk about all these challenges. But I am privileged and that I'm able to talk about these challenges and amplify the news and talk about it nationally and internationally for people to know that there are communities in Africa that are living without food because of the climate crisis, how women are being disproportionately affected by climate change. It's important to amplify this message because very many people do not know that the climate crisis is not impacting people equally. Some people are being impacted more than others. So it's an opportunity for me to speak up for the people that cannot speak for themselves. And this has really changed my life because I have a reason to live. I have a reason to continue waking up every day and doing something for my community because I've seen change.
Evelyn Acham is a climate activist, better known for her passion to conserve the environment and fight for climate justice for Africa. This young woman has initiated the Plus One Tree project and also is the national coordinator of the Rise Up movement, where she works with other climate activists like Vanessa Nakate. Her passion has become her work, and there is no slowing down ever since.
I founded the Plus One Tree project, which involves distribution and planting of fruit trees in homes and in schools. And the target is to plant 9 million fruit trees around Uganda because I realized that it's very hard for Ugandans to cut down fruit trees. It's easier for someone to cut down a tree that does not provide food for them. I'm also collaborating with Girl on the Move project. It's an initiative that was started by a fellow activist called Isaac. And this initiative involves empowering young women to be independent and to be able to take care of themselves amidst disasters like the climate crisis. And currently, young women are being trained and provided with vocational skills that are able to empower them and provide them with skills to earn a living.
But Evelyn was not born knowing that she will one day be a climate activist. Her journey to emerge as one of the prominent voices on climate and environmental issues was unplanned.
Well, I grew up not knowing about climate change until 2019 when I saw my fellow activist, Vanessa Nakate, do her individual protest in front of the parliament and the streets of Kampala. I was not aware about climate change, but when I started seeing all these protests, I got very concerned about why these placards, why she was holding the placard, and what is the reason, what's the message behind this placard. So I started doing research about global warming, and I realized that this is something that I have lived with for years. This is something that is impacting Uganda already, and it's getting worse. I realized that the prolonged droughts that we are experiencing in northeastern Uganda, the devastating floods in western Uganda, this is not something normal like I thought. I thought the life we are living, the floods that we are experiencing, the droughts, it's part of the way people should live. But again, it has been very hard growing up and seeing these challenges. So I got the urge, and I was so much intrigued to start advocating for climate change. And as well, I did a lot of research and realized that this is one of the biggest problems that my country, my community is experiencing, because Uganda heavily depends on agriculture for its economy. So I felt like this is something that we all need to speak about and fight for. And this is how I started advocating and fighting for climate justice.
Climate activism is relatively uncommon when it comes to activism in general and advocacy. And in Uganda, overall, opting to be part of this community opens one up to high risks. So when Evelyn decided to start her path as an activist, her family was not receptive to this idea.
Well, when I started activism, my family was not understanding me and everything looked strange. But I was consistent with what I was doing, holding the signs and placards. I got a lot of negative comments from my family. My parents were more concerned about me doing my paid degree job, like concentrating on that. Because you know, every parent, when they take you to school, they're more interested in seeing their effort or seeing what they invested in paying back. So my parents, my mom, my dad was so interested in how is your job? Have you got a job? They didn't understand what I was doing until I was so much consistent, and they started realizing how serious this was. And interesting enough, my grandfather is an environmentalist. When I was discussing with my grandfather about what I do and the impacts of climate change, he knew everything. My grandfather has been planting trees in our village. This encouraged me a lot, and it made me feel like I have someone in the family who has understood this effortlessly. But since then, my family, my parents, they've learned more about climate change and the importance of speaking up for this, because in my community where I was where we originate from, in eastern Uganda, in Palisa district, it's one of the communities that are heavily being hit by very bad droughts. There's a time I reached home and I realized my dad had lost a lot of weight, so much weight. And the reason why he had lost weight was because he had not been feeding well, because we all know people who are living up country or in villages only depend on agriculture. And the only way you can support people in villages is sending them food supplies and all that. So my dad had not been feeding well and he had lost a lot of weight. And this food prices had gone up, and the food that they were growing in their garden all had dried up. And I was so disturbed that this is climate change, like impacting my family directly. I was so much disturbed of I I had to like start sending food. And up to now, I try to send food at home, because I know that right now they cannot grow food because there's so much drought. But to cut that long story short, my mom talks about climate change. My dad talks about climate change. They're so supportive, and they know that we have to take action. We have to put these solutions in place. We have to speak up, and they're so much proud of me. But the most important thing for me right now is that some of my siblings have actually become activists, and they're actively advocating for climate justice. I have one of my siblings is in university, and he's talking about this and also influencing very many friends to join this advocacy. So this makes me proud. It makes me feel like people are understanding the need and the importance of the actions that we are taking, much as they look very radical.
Her bumpy start in climate activism taught Evelyn an important lesson, which is awareness, or the lack of it, in Uganda around climate activism. She now is focused on ensuring that climate awareness is integrated into the official education curriculum to ensure that everyone is well informed.
An information crisis in Uganda and in the world. And this is why I forgot to tell you at the beginning, I'm advocating for climate education to be added to the school curriculum. And I also take time and go to schools and talk to school children about climate change. So there's a crisis, there's an information gap about climate change. Very many people don't know about it. I didn't know about it until 2019. So no one cares if they don't know the problem. Nobody cares about taking action if they don't know the problem. So I think what pushed my siblings to start advocating for climate justice is the information that I gave them, is the word of knowledge that I kept on telling them, that the reason why we are having very long droughts, the reason why food prices are going up is because of climate change. And this is going to affect our children, it's going to affect the next generation. So it was out of concern and fear that very many relatives are now starting to advocate for this.
Recently, the Eastern Africa Crude Oil Pipeline EACOP project has become a flashpoint between the government of Uganda and citizens, including climate activists like Evelyn. The pipeline that is planned to run from Uganda to Tanzania has faced constant pressure and pushback from climate activists around the world, including Greenpeace. Evelyn, with other campaigners in Uganda, are part of this pushback, but at a great personal risk.
So as some activists in Uganda, especially those that talk about the EACOP pipeline. EACOP is the East African Crude Oil Pipeline. Most activists are being threatened, and there's a lot of security talking about the EACOP. I personally got arrested while protesting in front of the parliament, but of course I was not holding a sign with EACOP. I was holding something else, but I received threats after some time when I was protesting about that. So it's quite risky, and when you are threatened, of course you're worried about your life and you're worried about your family. You don't know who will protect you, or is there a lawyer or someone to support you in case anything happens. So how I'm coping with this is just finding ways of talking about this in a way that is safe for me and my family, because when I am alive, I'll continue speaking, but when I'm dead, I may not be speaking anymore. So I want to continue advocating for climate justice, and I'm doing activism in other ways that are impactful, like social media. I focus a lot on sharing my work on social media, and this has been impactful. This has had a great reach, people understanding exactly what I'm doing.
This young woman is comfortable to use social media as a platform to express and organize, but she's also aware that mainstream media can play a role in building awareness and creating necessary attention around issues. But Evelyn is also acutely aware that social media is a double-edged sword that cuts both ways.
So media is one of those platforms that we rely on as activists to be amplified, or to talk about our stories, to tell our stories, because there's limited support in amplifying voices of activists. And yet these stories need to be heard, these stories need to be extended out there. So I think having this media attention or media coverage is very important for activists, because these stories wouldn't have gone out there if we did not have the media attention. We would have just maybe not, we would have not really told our stories in the right way, or like not get the right people to meet us and talk to us and collaborate with us. So I think this is very important for the activism movement. The trolls keep coming. especially on a post or when something is released about you. There are a lot of trolls out there. But for me, I take a troll as, I take it as a blessing in disguise, because this shows that you're impacting someone. Yeah, because if people are not hearing you, they don't comment or they don't say anything. So I mean, I keep saying let the trolls keep trolling, because that only means that your voice is being heard. That thing that I would advise an activist to do is not to respond to the trolls. Just let the trolls keep coming and just keep doing your work, because very many activists are criticized. Very many activists, and through that criticism, they're trying to get words out of you, and maybe spoil your name or something. But just look at the bigger picture and don't respond to trolls. Keep doing your work, focus on your work, focus on the big goal, and you will see good results.
Climate change is Evelyn's passion, and she has very strong views about climate justice and how the impact of climate crisis is unfairly tilted against the least pollutant players, in this case, Africa.
When you do research, Africa is only responsible for less than 4% of global carbon emissions. But African countries are suffering the worst impacts of climate change, like the drought in the Horn of Africa, which has left so many people food insecure. Children and mothers are being impacted. Children are dropping out of school as a result of the impacts of climate change. Some parts of Africa, when the climate crisis happens, parents don't have enough resources to take their children to school. Because I mentioned earlier that Uganda heavily depends on agriculture for survival. Most of our parents are farmers. And when climate change affects when climate change impacts food security, parents are not able to get an income to take their children to school. And usually the girl child is the first that they look at to drop out of school, or to stay at home and help with extra farm work and help with house chores, or fetch water to use at home. And this girl ends up in marriage or early child marriage. So the climate crisis in Africa, it's intersectional. It's impacting women differently. It's impacting children differently. It's impacting the poor people differently. When floods happen, children don't go to school. We are seeing this happening in Uganda, the drought in the Horn of Africa, devastating floods. We saw last year what happened in Mozambique, in southern Africa, the tropical storm that hit Mozambique, and thousands of people lost their lives. Millions of people were displaced. In southern Africa last year, the devastating flood that happened killed thousands of people, and many went missing, and this was connected or related to climate change. Nigeria has been flooding, parts of Nigeria are flooding and submerged in water. The climate crisis is not something new to Africa. It's happening, and yet people in Africa do not have adaptation measures. They do not have resources to adapt. The people responsible have failed to provide the climate finance to help in adaptation. They failed to provide the fund to help people recover from loss and damage, because people have been pushed to a point beyond adaptation, and we've been demanding for a loss and damage facility, which is taking long, it's taking time, and yet people are losing their properties every day. So as an African continent that is responsible for the climate crisis, this is what we are demanding as activists for the global north, for the rich countries that have caused the climate crisis, provide climate finance that they committed to over 12 years back to provide that climate finance to support communities like mine in adaptation. But this money is still not being talked about. This money is being ignored. Yeah, so this is what's happening in Africa right now. The climate crisis is impacting us, but we don't have resources to help people in adaptation, to help people in mitigation. We don't have resources to help people recover from loss and damage. But the climate crisis is happening and it's not waiting. I can say that when women meet to work together, there's a kind of sisterhood that is formed. I may not be working with individual activists, but I'm working with groups that are headed by women. I'm working nationally. I am working with Rise Up Movement. It's headed by a young woman. I've been collaborating and working with Malala Fund, which was founded by a woman. I'm part of the Global Choices as an Arctic Angel. This is a group of young women who are fighting for the protection of the ice, because we all know that what happens in the Arctic will not stay in the Arctic. It's going to impact the whole world. And I'm working with very many young women activists around the world that are very passionate about protection of the planet and fighting for the rights of the people. Well, activism has a lot of biases and challenges, but for me, these challenges it's the reason for us to continue advocating for what we are speaking about. But some of the challenges that I've experienced personally or seen fellow activists experiencing is people not believing in what we are doing. At the beginning, like most of the people that we are working with, they did not understand what we were doing. And because there's a gap in the education system, we are playing a very big role to explain from scratch to people what we are doing, something that should have been done in school. This is very straining because it's a whole process of going to a classroom and talking to people of different generations and explaining to them. And it's not a guarantee that they understand immediately. You have to keep talking to them. You have to keep convincing them. You have to keep giving them examples. So there's a challenge of people people doubting what we are doing and calling it a fiction. And there's also, we're experiencing challenges of threats, like I talked about earlier. We don't have that freedom of expressing ourselves freely. In some countries like mine, you're not able to go on the streets, and yet we understand the streets so well as activists, but you're not able to go on the streets. You're not able to reach people who are not on internet. Like, let me say, people in rural areas, there's no great reach for these people because there's limitation to reach these people. You can only find these people on the street. And yeah, I think those are some of the constraints that we are experiencing as activists.
Where does Evelyn find the courage to continue despite both physical and digital threats?
I'm a born-again Christian, and I spend part of my time in church. I serve in my church as an usher, and this has also helped me grow spiritually, because through my service towards God, I'm also drawing deeper and deeper with God. So when you draw deeper and deeper with God, there's that comfort that you get in God. Even when challenges are coming, you know that you're not going to give up. You know that it's the will of God for humanity to be protected. It's the will of God for the planet and the environment to be protected, because God left for us the planet or the earth to take care of it and not to destroy it. So I get my support, I get my strength, number one, from the word of God. And also I get my strength from activists that I work with are all over the world, because very many activists sometimes have mental breakdowns. Like, let me say, for example, activists are speaking up so much. We are doing so much. We are campaigning so much, but the action is too slow. Leaders are taking their time to take action, and this is frustrating, honestly. This is making very many activists break down mentally. But what's giving us strength is just meeting and sharing ideas and talking to each other and encouraging each other, and taking off some moments of doing activism and just doing other things, like having retreats, like going out together as friends.
Evelyn is aware that as a young woman in a field like activism, she faces double as much difficulties, but she also sees this as a unique opportunity because of women's perspective on mainstream issues like climate.
I would like to start with the problem that we are facing right now. Women are disproportionately being impacted, and we need to stand up as women and speak up for all these indifferences that are happening in communities. Climate change is like, it's at the center of all these problems, because when there's a crisis, gender-based violence increases. When there's a crisis, women empowerment reduces, inequalities increase, early child marriages increase. So as women, we are very vulnerable to any crisis. I call upon women around the world, and I want to advise you to be on top of the game, to speak up and not stay silent. Don't worry about the resources that you have. Your voice is very important. It doesn't matter which part of the world you are. It doesn't matter which area you are. It doesn't matter who is watching you or listening to you at that time. You just need to start from where you are. You just need to start with what you have and speak up for that challenge in your community. Someone one day will hear you. Someone one day will listen to you and amplify your voice and amplify your story, and you'll get a solution for your community, because nobody is going to come and speak for your community if you don't stand up and speak for your community. You are the voice of your community.
Being so young, yet having achieved so much, Evelyn's message to anyone interested in getting into activism is simple but challenging.
I just want to encourage every activist out there not to give up. Your voice is very important. You are being heard, and you are doing something that not everyone can do. And just keep doing it. Don't give up. Do not worry about the criticisms, and even amidst of challenges, just find a solution immediately and work on it. Don't give up. The potential that we all have, that everyone is able to speak up and be heard, that there's no voice that is too small. People need to stand up and speak. You don't have to wait for maybe an influential person to speak for you. You don't have to wait for your president to speak for your problem, or for your member of parliament or local council chairman. You can do that small action. You can start with that small action in your community and speak up for that challenge that you're experiencing in your community. Because if you don't speak up, no one is going to come out to help you. You continue losing your relatives. You continue losing your people while the world is moving on. So it has taught me that staying silent is making everything worse. If you stay silent, you won't be heard. So it's better to speak up, even if you're not being heard immediately, but you've done something. You haven't just sat back and waited for maybe action to find you. You have to speak up.